People like to compare things. The first thing I'll do, if you make the mistake of inviting me into your home, is cultivate a series of irrational hatreds for everything you've earned that's nicer than everything I haven't. What were you, trying? You disgust me. Gamers are even worse about this sort of thing because we tend to obsess over stuff that doesn't really matter, and find ways to disagree about things we all love. The PlayStation 5 looks like a Wi-Fi router, but the Xbox Series X looks like a different Wi-Fi router, or a mini fridge. It's unhealthy to spend a lot of time focusing on the best. If you enjoy driving a wobbly old car, or you think Season 8 was the best season of Game of Thrones, you can't really be wrong about what you enjoy. Don't overthink it. That's my job. Comparing things like this rarely serves anybody well, but it can be kind of fun, so... When Super Metroid came out, I remember thinking, this is gonna be like Metroid, but super. Marketing departments are highly effective on the minds of 11-year-old boys. But you know, it turned out to be the goddamn truth. The game was everything I could have hoped for, and it went beyond what I thought was even possible at the time. It made other games seem a little bit stupid. Some of you must have agreed because, according to the internet, this is when the genre peaked. Back in the 90s, a time when the little children wore their pants backwards and rode skateboards to the mall to collect little cardboard discs and fight them for more little cardboard discs. Society on the whole was only about half-baked in 1994, but this was the pinnacle of human achievement in video games. In the quarter of a century since, nobody's been able to do a thing quite like Super Metroid. Nothing so good. It's a perennial favorite pick for one of the greatest games ever made, and I posted a glowing review of it only a week ago myself. No matter how many quirky indie games come along and try their hand at dethroning the queen, Super Metroid is still obviously the best Metroidvania. Right? That's when this little fella showed up. Some people say he's the best little fella there is. Better than the chick from Super Smash Bros. Even. And you know, people say a lot of stupid things, but the stupid people who said that might have a point. Hollow Knight is a darkly adorable little game made by two bright young so-and-sos, at minimum, who call themselves Team Cherry. It's the grand champion of indie developers' recent bent toward Metroidvania games, and it's got everything Samus Belmont could ask for, in spades. It's huge and labyrinthine. There are oodles of disparate doodads to collect and make your little bugman incrementally more powerful. There are fungal monstrosities, exploding mosquitoes, tiny giant bush babies, and more. These caves are so dank and so dour, you could swear you were actually depressed. But you're not, at least not right now. You're experiencing a type of fun called immersion. Hollow Knight's art style is an obvious strong point. The game has a very consistent artistic direction and a real vibe going for it, bleak upon bleak. The backgrounds are digitally hand-painted with striking detail, while characters pop out with somewhat simpler aesthetics and big white faces to help you keep track of them on screen in the midst of fast-paced action. You can tell that a great deal of care went into crafting this world, both with regard to its beauty and the practicality of actually playing it. But Super Metroid is pretty, too. When you compare the pixel work here to other games of the era, it stands out as one of the most intricately designed worlds anyone had ever seen. The only games that matched this level of detail were cheating, sort of. Donkey Kong Country used 3D models converted into sprites, which, at the time, seemed crazy realistic. And Mortal Kombat just used horribly compressed images of real, actual people. I'm not suggesting there's anything wrong with either of those games, rather, I'm impressed that Super Metroid achieved a similar level of detail even though it was made by hand, one pixel at a time, and there's something to that. It still looks quite fetching today. All that being said, Hollow Knight is ostensibly a beautiful painting you could roll out and cover most major metropolitan areas, so I can't not give it the gold star here. Where Hollow Knight seems to most confidently claim the top prize is in its controls and combat, which are kind of important things. Movement feels good, your character is sharp and agile, and the bug-on-bug violence is satisfying, so long as you don't think too deeply about it. As you earn more power-ups, you start to chain together your moves and navigate the map like some sort of a sexy little dance ninja. Some of the game's boss battles are as stressful and eventually euphoric as the best in the Dark Souls series. You'll die, probably a lot, but most of the time you'll know what you did wrong and hop up to take another crack at it. The game asks you to fall into a rhythm and master each encounter like you're learning to play a new song. It feels great when you hit all the right notes, and the controls are fluid and responsive. By comparison, Super Metroid's controls might feel slow and rigid. The enemies mostly come across as minor obstacles that the game works to make obsolete. Boss fights can be fun and challenging, but they don't hold up to Hollow Knight's finely tuned encounters. You get the sense that combat and platforming aren't especially important here. However, combat was never the point in Super Metroid. It continues to be held up as a gold standard for game design because of its map, pacing, music, and atmosphere. The player is constantly nudged in the right direction, toward new and rewarding experiences, hopefully without ever realizing that they're being shown the way. The tone of the game is pretty dark and lonesome, but as you power Samus up into her final form, you feel like a hero. It's triumphant. These shifts in tone, as well as the boss fights, which, while not mechanically amazing, serve as great set-piece moments, and create a tight and perfectly tuned game that feels cinematic and constantly engaging. Hollow Knight arguably matches Super Metroid's immersiveness, but it can't really keep up with its steady pace and reward structure. The tone of the game rarely shifts at all, and while its map is large and complex, it too often leaves the player stranded without an objective. It might actually be a little too big for its own good. Bigger isn't always better, and Hollow Knight is a game that could be accused of overstaying its welcome. Halfway through, I felt like I'd pretty much experienced everything it had to show me, and for the rest of my first playthrough, I pressed on out of duty, facing slightly more difficult versions of very familiar challenges, trying to get to the end. It got to feeling like a bit of a chore, albeit still an enjoyable one. I don't fault Hollow Knight too much for those issues. This isn't 1994, and players want a lot more out of their games these days. The developers have created a world here that offers enough to keep a hardcore community engaged for years. What one player might see as the game's biggest flaw could be its greatest strength from another perspective. Hollow Knight was never really supposed to be a Metroidvania game. It just sort of worked out that way. The road taken to get there is important because it might explain why Hollow Knight feels so special. Where other games in the genre seem to be overtly cribbing Metroid's homework, Hollow Knight is its own thing. It feels original, and it's trying to hook you in different ways. That being said, Super Metroid has kept fans engaged for 25 years, without really trying. It's one of the games that helped to bring the speedrunning community into its maturity. For a short game, by modern standards, players have managed to find countless reasons and new ways to keep playing. The thing that most surprised me when I sat down to write this review is that these two games are actually a lot more different than I initially gave them credit for. Hollow Knight ticks all of the Metroidvania boxes, but it aspires to go beyond the confines of any one genre. Direct, objective comparisons here are problematic, but I'm not going to cop out on picking a winner. Ultimately, the only way I can decide which of these two games is better is to ask which of them is more successful at being whatever it is. In that light, one of these games is almost perfect, and the other is only fantastically great. For a more in-depth look at Super Metroid and the way it changed video games, watch my video on Super Metroid and the way it changed video games. Next week I'll be looking at Spelunky 2 and struggling to decide if it's better than the original. Like and subscribe if you want. Leave a comment while you're at it. There are a lot of things you could do. You can take a picture of the screen with your phone, have it printed and framed, and hang it proudly in your office. You can watch the video again at half speed and slowly convince yourself that you're drunk. Think of the savings. You can get drunk if all else fails, and if you're drunk, make sure you like and subscribe, and leave a comment while you're at it.